Yes, I want to thank Special Agent Green and the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, U.S. Attorney Kenneth L. Parker, Southern District of Ohio, obviously our Chief of Police, Chief Bryant, Deputy Chief Slagle, the Columbus Division of Police, Director Pasciati, and the Department of Public Safety, Assistant Special Agent in Charge Daniel Lorza from the U.S. Department of Labor, Office of Inspector General, the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. It's my pleasure to be here today to help showcase the success of an innovative partnership spanning in multiple agencies and jurisdictions, all working together in pursuit of a single goal: to rid our neighborhoods of violent crime. Here's how it worked. Federal, state, and local partners joined forces to go after criminal gangs involved with drug-related gun violence, poisonings, overdose deaths, and trafficking. Truly the worst of the worst. Not only did we go after these criminals, but we also confiscated their weapons, their contraband, and whatever else they had in their possession that they were using to destabilize and undermine our neighborhoods and put all of our families at risk. It was called Operation Overdrive, and it took place over many months in several cities across the country. In Columbus, we focused our efforts in the East Haven neighborhood. I'm pleased to share that the Columbus component of this national initiative was an unqualified success. Others will share the details on that in just a few moments. But here's the bottom line. The criminal gangs that were the focus of our campaign in East Haven were dealt a major blow thanks to the combined contributions of all of our partners. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. We're constantly modifying our methods to ensure that our efforts are both nimble and effective. That's why we have a comprehensive neighborhood safety strategy, which we continue to strengthen and fine-tune with each passing day, that focuses on prevention, intervention, and enforcement. Operation Overdrive is one example of how we're adjusting to changing circumstances and confronting the range of challenges at hand. The safety of our community is on the line, and we need every possible partner to pitch in. This includes federal law enforcement, who brings to the table decades of specialized experience and expertise, and works regularly with local entities to capture dangerous criminals and take them into custody. This also includes the county, prosecutors and judges, who we need to put these criminals behind bars and help keep our streets safe. And this includes all of you, the people of Columbus. We need each of you to raise your voice and get involved as well. As they always say, if you see something, say something. And this is particularly true right now as we address an uptick in homicides this year. This is a community issue, and we'll solve it together as a community. There's no single solution, but rather a broad range of tactics, when deployed thoughtfully, strategically, and collaboratively, will lead to meaningful change and ultimately a safer, healthier, and more prosperous Columbus. It's now my pleasure to introduce the Special Agent in Charge, Orville Green, with the U.S. DEA.
Good morning. Thank you, Mayor Ginther. Chief Bryant, thank you. Thank you all for being here today. DEA's core mission is to protect the safety and health of Americans from criminal drug networks harming our communities with drug-related violence, fatal poisonings, and overdoses. As part of that mission, last year in 34 communities across the country, including Cleveland, Dayton, and Cincinnati, DEA launched Operation Overdrive. Operation Overdrive, a collaborative effort with our state and local law enforcement partners, is a data-driven, intelligence-led approach used to identify and dismantle criminal drug networks operating in areas with the highest rates of drug-related violence and overdoses. Later in the year, DEA launched Phase 2 of Operation Overdrive in an additional 57 cities, including Columbus. I am pleased to stand here with Mayor Ginther, Chief Bryant, U.S. Attorney Parker, Deputy Chief Sagal, and our law enforcement partners to announce the arrest of more than 50 individuals on violence, drug trafficking, and fraud charges. This is just the latest example of how working in partnership with fellow federal, state, and local law enforcement can have a major impact to the quality of life for citizens in an entire community. More details will become public as this judicial process progresses. But what I can share with you today is that this investigation began in October of 2022, and since that time, law enforcement has made multiple arrests and seizures, which will be detailed by Deputy Chief Sagal. Regarding the fentanyl seizures that Deputy Chief Sagal will discuss later, it is extremely important that we not lose sight of the fact that 2 milligrams of fentanyl is a potentially lethal dose. This organization was dealing in quantities that had the potential to kill thousands. Before I close, I would like to recognize and thank the many investigators who worked tirelessly to bring these cases to fruition. I would like to thank the Columbus Division of Police, who extended many resources in support of this operation. We value and appreciate your dedication and partnership in making a difference together in our community. I would also like to recognize the U.S. Department of Labor, OIG, and ATF for their outstanding contributions and support to this investigation. Lastly, I would like to thank and extend gratitude to the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Ohio for their outstanding prosecutorial efforts. To the investigative team, I know there is little fanfare or glory in the countless hours it requires to fully investigate these types of cases. However, you should know that your efforts, professionalism, and perseverance has undoubtedly improved the quality of life for an untold number of Americans throughout Ohio, and more than likely saved lives as well. Thank you. I would now like to introduce Deputy Chief Sagal.
Good morning. My name is Robert Sagal. I'm the Deputy Chief over the Special Operations Subdivision of the Columbus Division of Police. I stand here on behalf of Chief Elaine Bryant, Commander Amy Haley, and Deputy Chief Tim Myers, who oversees our Patrol South Subdivision. First, I'd like to thank our federal partners who are here today and helped with the success of Operation Overdrive. I'd also like to thank Mayor Ginther for joining us as we highlight these important partnerships and the great work of the men and women of the Division of Police. Operation Overdrive was driven by the hard work and dedication of officers and supervisors of the Community Response Team on Zone 2. This team works diligently to rid their areas of responsibilities of violent crime and drugs. In partnership with detectives from the Criminal Intelligence Unit of the Organized Crime Bureau and all of our federal and local partners, officers made a total of 53 arrests, 14 of which were priority investigative targets, which means using the data, they were identified to show that they were responsible for a large amount of the violent crime occurring in the East Haven area. A total of 50 firearms were seized, including 4 rifles, 4 shotguns, and 42 handguns. One thing I wanted to highlight about that, though, is also recovered were 3 conversion devices, sometimes referred to as Glock switches, which allow a handgun to be converted to fully automatic. Those are something that we've been taking a specific look at trying to target getting off our street, because obviously it makes areas much more dangerous, makes shootings much more violent. There were also distribution amounts of fentanyl, methamphetamine, cocaine, and marijuana recovered as well, and associated charges on individuals. Columbus Division of Police remains dedicated to continuing these operations with our partners in order to reduce the impacts of violent crime around our communities. I would like to now introduce the U.S. Attorney of the Southern District of Ohio, Ken Parker.
Good morning. And I will be brief. We truly appreciate the coordinated efforts of all of our federal partners, our state and local law enforcement partners. We appreciate the Mayor of Columbus, Mayor Ginther, and the Chief Bryant. I appreciate the DEA SAC Special Agent in Charge, Green, and everything that they did. Operation Overdrive, for those who are being prosecuted, as far as we're concerned, they are within the system. But let this be a warning to those folks who continue to deal and traffic in fentanyl and other dangerous narcotics, those who choose violence over a different way of life, those who choose to let greed be the thing that drives them in the morning. This is a warning that we are not going to stop. We're going to prosecute those individuals as well. A person who's involved in an overdose poisoning, they're looking at a 20-year mandatory minimum sentence. The prosecutors in our office, they do a great job. They will continue to do so. I would ask the persons who, I call them the insulators, the mothers, the fathers, the other family members who know that their loved ones are involved in illegal activity, to speak up. Being in the courtroom with our prosecutors, with assistant U.S. attorneys, is not the time to speak up and ask for mitigating circumstances to be applied. That is for the judge to do. I would ask you to speak up now. Talk to your loved ones. Explain to them that violence is not the way. Help them to understand that Operation Overdrive, this is not the only one that will be applied, and they can find their loved ones in front of federal prosecutors. I thank the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office for its commitment to this. But again, let this be a warning to those who are not already within the parameters of our targets for Operation Overdrive, to those insulators, to speak up to your loved ones. Help them to understand that prison is not the way to go. While we cannot prosecute our way out of this, we will still prosecute. Thank you.
All right, we'll open up for questions.
Are you able to speak to why East Haven was the target of this?
So the DEA had a matrix that had to do with several different things, including violence, drug trafficking, and overdose poisonings. And the East Haven area met the matrix just through the different data-driven approaches they utilized to identify that area. It also then identified those priority individuals that are responsible for a large amount of the crime in that area. There were 18 total targets. I left that part out, 14 of which were arrested during the operation.
You described maybe a level of organization in these criminal enterprises. Could you speak to what kind of level of organization we were talking about with these groups?
I could speak briefly about it. Obviously, there's all kinds of different levels. The criminal charges had everything to do with, from drug trafficking to weapons violations to also financial crimes. And they were using those financial crimes to basically feed their criminal enterprise. So whether it was some sort of a, welfare fraud or something to that nature, they used the proceeds of those financial crimes to drive their narcotics distribution enterprise.
Can anybody talk about the teeth that are involved in law enforcement or actually enforcing the law on somebody who's caught with one of these altered firearms, the Glock switch, or to turn them into essentially an automatic weapon?
Yeah, when a firearms turn into a machine gun, there's a federal statute for that, and the person's looking at increased penalties. People have to understand if you are caught with a firearm, even without a Glock switch, and it's in furtherance of a drug trafficking crime or a crime of violence, you're looking at a mandatory minimum of 60 months. And that's on top of whatever the other charge would be for the distribution of the narcotics. So that can also change if you have previously been charged and convicted of a 924C. When you're dealing with a person who is involved in an overdose poisoning, again, that's a mandatory minimum of 240 months coming in. And so individuals have to take their own lives serious, very, very serious, and say, is that $50 2 grams of fentanyl distribution, is that worth 5 years of my life or 20 years if the person dies? Again, if a person dies, we're seeing individuals say, well, I didn't know they were going to die. That's not, you can't say that now. That has occurred. Fentanyl is poison. Even those persons who are involved in taking narcotics need to understand that we've seen a large amount of the drugs that's on the street, cocaine, everything is laced with fentanyl now. And so we're very fearful of that. And SAC Green just put out a release and has sounded the word on Trank now that we're dealing with. And so xylazine. So individuals who are even consuming the product need to be very fearful and taking into account their own lives. A woman just was prosecuted over in Kentucky for her child who's 2 years old who died from fentanyl poisoning the other day, and she got 33 years yesterday. So I would hope individuals will take all that into account, the statute, the penalties that are involved, but also you can lose your life thinking you're just taking cocaine.
I just wanted to offer just one, excuse me, one point of clarification. So at the point that it's determined that these cities are chosen for Operation Overdrive cities based on the metrics determined by DEA headquarters, at the local level, we then get with our partners and we confirm that this is in fact, the data matches up. And so we rely heavily on that partnership. We don't just come in and we tell Chief Bryant, this is where we're going, this is what we're going to do. We come in and we have a conversation, and it's a true partnership, and they provide a bulk of the resources that we then use to challenge, to attack those challenges that are really of great concern to the local departments as well. Just wanted to offer that clarification.
Is Operation Overdrive over, or is there going to be more targeted areas?
Well, this iteration of it, as far as the DEA initiative is over, the partnerships actually were strengthened through Overdrive in terms of how we all got to work together and how the Columbus DEA office, led by ASAC Michelle Spahn, how that grew the partnership with Columbus Division of Police. So there are opportunities, obviously based on the success of this operation, to really move forward and to look at other neighborhoods and to, again, deploy sort of what we've learned into having success in other places. Yes.
Excuse me. What does it say about Ohio that Cleveland, Dayton, Cincinnati, Columbus were all involved in this operation? What does it say about Ohio as a whole? I mean, there's obviously a big problem in Ohio.
Well, I think it says the same thing about the rest of the country. Ohio wasn't the only state. I think as we identify where those challenges are, we can't be bashful or embarrassed about actually addressing them. So I think what it says about Ohio is that we're willing to roll up our sleeves and get in there and identify our problems and actually work at them.
What cities had the most arrests? Like, where was the most congested areas, and what was the target number that you guys were? I know there were 53 arrests. Was there a target number of people you were trying to?
So no, there wasn't a target number. I don't know what cities had the most arrests, and I don't know how significant that is, right? Because when we're talking about addressing the actual challenges, addressing those drivers of violent crime, if our number was 3 and we got 3 significant drivers of violent crime, then that's a win for us, as opposed to arresting 50 people, 60 people who had really minimal impact. What this type of program is designed to do is to address those drivers of violent crime, to really target the worst of the worst. So I think the numbers per se, I don't think those numbers are really significant in terms of who had the highest, who had the lowest, who had the most significant impact on those drivers of violent crime, I think is what we should be focused on.
Just one question. So of the 53 people charged, how many are in federal and how many will be going through Franklin County? I don't know if that was...
Would you like to address that?
As you know, we don't speak much about our investigations and so forth. We have a number that we are reviewing for organizations to take federal at this time. One has been charged, one person, but there are a number that will be moving to the federal system.
And then the rest are possibly facing charges in Franklin County or may have charges in federal later.
Correct.
Last question?
Maybe a question for the mayor or the chief, but when we're dealing with arrests with these significant drugs, how does that help us when it comes to other arrests for just, other violent crimes, gun crimes, domestic violence, or, just different things like that we see on a day-to-day?
Anytime you're able to take a violent person off the street is going to help the city tremendously. And when you look at violent crime as a whole, typically when you look at when you look at the crimes, they don't just stay in silos. They transcend to other crimes. So anytime that we're able to address or take someone off the street, we're probably saving a life, or we're probably saving someone from being feloniously assaulted, or we're saving another crime from occurring. So it's significant across the board.
The only thing I would add to the chief's comments and what's been said is we go back to the fact that there are roughly just under 500 people in this community that are committing roughly half the violence. And so with Deputy Chief Slagle's comments about folks that were targeted because of their violent behavior, their illegal crime and gang activity and so forth, with that great success rate, and the more folks that we can take off of those folks that are committing a disproportionate amount of violence, not to mention, I mean, we've talked about it before, but the proliferation of illegal crime guns on our streets in this city and cities across the country continues to put others' safety, health, and life at risk. And so with the significant amount of firearms taken off the streets through this operation, I think we're seeing some good success. We have so much more to do, but I think this is something we can certainly build on, and a great partnership, across federal, state, and local level that we can build on as well.